So then, we've reached that time of year where we're all doing our new Premier League predictions for a new season. And this year, I think it's particularly difficult to predict this. There's so many ways you can order this. Trust me, I did not find this easy finalising a table. I think pretty much every team here I swapped and changed and put in different positions. So please, bear in mind now that it's not easy, and I'm trying to predict something 9 months before it's even finished or even started. So don't insult me in the comments if you could. You definitely will. If you want to go and watch my EFL Championship version of this that I did with Dom, then please go and check that out as well. That's arguably even more hard to do. So let's start from bottom, working our way up, and I wanted to be different here, but in the end I decided to be extremely boring and predictable. Burnley in 20th. Last season they came second with 100 points. I don't really think you can be much more unlucky than that. And they only conceded 16 times in 46 matches. That is really quite incredible. Based off that, you think maybe they've actually got a defence here that could suffice in the Premier League. We've got to remember, the last 2 seasons, all 3 promoted teams have gone straight back down. The gap is clearly getting bigger. I don't think Scott Parker is a proven Premier League manager. You've got to look at his record. He's got relegated twice from the Premier League. He's been sacked by 2 separate clubs at this level. That's not somebody who I think is going to cut it at this level. 19th, Leeds United. I think they've got a chance of staying up. I'm not going to say that they are definite certainties to go down. I genuinely did have them staying up at one stage when I was doing this. But it's a little bit similar to the situation with Scott Parker. Daniel Farke, whenever he's been in the Premier League, only with Norwich of course, has been pretty horrific. Now, is that just a Norwich problem? Or is it a problem with him? Or is it a bit of both? Well, we're going to find that out this season. And I think there's a reason why Leeds were speculating whether they should keep him or not going into the Premier League season. I think if they are going to stay up, that home form at Allen Road is going to be absolutely crucial. You know how loud it can get at that place and how hostile it can get. And I do not at all discount Leeds staying up. I think they definitely can, but I think they're going to have some tough days as well this season. This is not my fault that I'm being boring here. Blame the Premier League teams for not being good enough. I really don't want to do this, but I've put Sunderland in 18th place. I am saying all 3 teams are going back down. How boring, how unoriginal. I know, prove me wrong. I want you to prove me wrong. I really want one of these teams to stay up. They were out of my bottom 3 for quite a bit of these predictions when I was doing them, but the reason why I put them down in the end was overall, are they going to have enough quality? Are they going to have enough experience? Ultimately, they've got a second youngest squad in the league. And that defence does not convince me. Okay, they've signed Arthur Masuaku in the last day or so, but I just think they need more at the back. They've signed the likes of Granit Xhaka, Adingra, Diarra, the lad from Chelsea that I can't pronounce, of course, one of the many players that Chelsea have got out on loan. Some great signings there, and I do not discredit that, but defensively, I think it could really hit them. I think Sunderland are probably going to do what Ipswich did. They're going to be a very spirited team, actually play some good stuff at times, but overall might just run out of steam, and I hope I'm wrong, I really do. But I think the 3 teams above the relegation zone have a very strong case to be in the bottom 3 instead. And the first one, in 17th, is Wolves. Wolves to me scream no direction. It was only when, of course, Victor Pereira came in last season, he definitely got a tune out of them and he pulled them away from relegation. But ultimately Wolves sold their best players in all 4 lots, Mateus Cunha and of course Aitan Ori, can't say his name quite right. They've both left the club and Wolves do this basically every summer. It was Neto the year before they got away with that. But I don't look at this side now and think anybody stands out quite to the level that those 2 did. And I don't think they're going to replace them with anybody quite like that either. You cannot discredit Wolves from going down. The last couple of seasons, they've got worryingly close to that bottom 3. I'm not saying they can't do it this year, but I think it's going to be quite a tough one again for Wolves. Now, a lot of people are writing this team off, and I'm not, okay? I'm not being that boring. I've got Brentford in the 16th, and ultimately so many people are saying they're going to go down for a reason, because they have lost, obviously, Thomas Frank, the manager. They've lost Mboma. They're probably going to lose Visser. They've lost Norgard. They've lost a massive, huge core of that team. But I looked at their team and I thought, overall, they've got a much more solid team than the teams I've put below them. They've still got their defence intact. they've still got a stronger defence, I think, than all three teams that have come up. And I think that could be crucial. The fact that they haven't lost their defence, of course, they've not got Flecker anymore, but they've signed a fantastic keeper in place in Kelleher, so I don't think that's an issue at all. Jordan Henderson coming into a place Norgard isn't anything too exciting, but I think he can at least maybe do a job for them at a lower level. I think it's going to be a tougher season, but I think overall they should have enough quality. But Keith Andrews, I am very concerned about that. I think that's a very unusual appointment. I'm not saying he's not good enough, but that's probably more concerning than losing key players. If anything's going to cost them, I think it'll be the manager. But my predictions may be a bit boring, but if only there was a way of you making it a bit more interesting for yourself while you're watching the games. That's where Match Bingo comes in. Match Bingo allows you to combine sports betting, football and bingo all into one app while watching along with your favourite team. It is the same concept as normal bingo, but with football, so therefore it's a lot more interesting, surely. Over £200,000 have been paid out to players so far who have played Match Bingo, and the deal for this game is buy 4, get 1 free. So ahead of the Premier League kick-off this weekend, when your team are playing, please make sure you check out Match Bingo with the link at the top of the description or the QR code on screen right now. Thank you to Match Bingo for sponsoring this video and Rads, and onwards. West Ham, another team that I do not think are at all out of danger. I've got them in 15th place. The last couple of seasons, they've got slowly more and more away from where they were before, which was of course fighting for European football. I think the days of them getting into Europe every year are long gone. Graham Potter's got a big point to prove this season about his ability as a manager. It didn't work for him at Chelsea. It was obviously great at Brighton. It didn't really work for him last season either. On paper, they should finish a lot higher. They really should. But last season, they were pretty awful at times. They were very stale. Even when they won, they weren't anything to shout about. And they've not done the most spectacular business. They've done a couple of solid signings. Kyle Walker-Peters I like. Hermanson coming in from Leicester I like. They brought in a forward from Slavia Prague. But I look at their strikers, Callum Wilson and Nicholas Fulcrew, both over 30, both injury prone. I just think they're going to be there. I don't think they're going to do much more than just exist at this level. There's not really much clear direction at West Ham right now. Bournemouth, I've got them in 14th. This is quite a drop off for them, of course, having finished 9th last year. They have lost the core of their defence, just like Brentford have lost the core of their attack and obviously a midfielder and a manager. It's probably worse for Brentford. Bournemouth losing Zabani, Howson and Kirkes. That is their left back and 2 starting centre backs. That is really quite horrific that they've lost those 3. They are in the market to sign replacements, but if they sign 3 players as good as them 3, I'll be very surprised. They have bought in a left back in Treffet, a player that Forest have been linked with over the years. I think that's a very solid replacement for Kirkes. But centre back, they've got to get it right. If they don't, you look at their centre backs right now, it's pretty concerning. If they go into the Premier League season with those centre backs, they could finish lower than 14th. I really think so. The reason why I've kept them this high, regardless, is the rest of the squad is still very good and they've still got a great manager. I think they could definitely finish higher if they sort those centre-backs out. I've got Fulham dropping off a little bit to 13th. They've got one of the smaller squads in the league right now, which can't be great. You do need squad depth. I think they're a very solid side. They obviously beat Forest in pre-season pretty easily. They're a good team, no doubt about it, but they need definitely more depth. And last season, they genuinely, at their best, could have easily qualified for the Europa League, 100%. One week they'd win against the top side, the next week they'd lose to, I don't even know they lost to. They lost to teams that they shouldn't lose to, basically. Too inconsistent, that's their problem. Crystal Palace, obviously in a fantastic place right now, winning the FA Cup, winning the Community Shield, got European football to look forward to, regardless of what level it is. I'm recording this before the decision's made. Looks like it's going to be the Conference League. I still think that's great for them, and I think they could absolutely win the Conference League, so they should be quite happy about that from that point of view. The European football for the first time ever for Palace, they've got to try and juggle Premier League and Europe. Is that going to hit them? I think they can still do alright. I could easily see why you put them lower, but I think they're probably going to really have an eye on European football. I think Palace could do better than this, but with Europe, I've got to consider that. That's why I'm putting them 12th, and they've not really done much business besides Sosa coming in at left back. Everton, they've also got one of the smaller squads in the league, but last season, even with a small squad, they were very impressive under David Moyes. They had one of the best defences in the league, despite finishing, not particularly high up the table. A new stadium, that could be a bad or good thing. It wasn't good for West Ham, for example, but it could be a good thing for Everton. We're going to have to wait and see. They haven't got a big squad, but they're definitely working towards changing that. They are in talks to sign Jack Grealish, which would be, I think, an outstanding signing for them. Kieran Dewsbury-Hall, I think, is a top-notch signing as well for Everton. They've signed Barry from Villarreal, who had a very good season last year in the Liga. So despite a small squad, they're clearly working towards changing that, and I think they could do genuinely quite a lot better this season. In 10th place, I've got Nottingham Forest. I'm putting us right in the middle of the table, and I don't think that would be a bad thing whatsoever. Let's not lose sight of where we've come from. For me to be predicting us to finish 10th is quite incredible, really. I know it's lower than last season, but last season I think I said we'd be 15th, not even considering top 10, quite frankly. So to say minimum top 10, that's amazing. Ultimately, European football, we're going to have to juggle that with the current squad depth. I think that is going to be extremely difficult to do, all but impossible in some cases. But I think really the squad we've got, we should absolutely be getting top 10 as a minimum. And I think that is the goal this season, is obviously to get back in Europe and try and stay in Europe and be that sort of team. But if we can just stabilise as a top 10 club, I'll be extremely happy with that. Cunha, Jesus, and Doy, Angus Gunn have come in. We need more. If we do get more, we stand a good chance, but we've got to sort out the form because it's a bit worrying. In 9th, we've got Brighton, another very solid team. They've come in one place lower for me than last season. Brighton, honestly, they could be 6th, they could be 12th. I generally don't know. They're a very good side, but a bit like Fulham, very inconsistent. If they could just be a bit more consistent, they could be a very frightening team. They've got some fantastic squad depth, nothing spectacular in terms of the window. Obviously, they've lost Pedro, they could lose Belieber. But Brighton, unlike Brentford in particular, they do tend to sell their key players, but they always tend to replace them with hidden gems, and you just think, who the hell is that? And then the next thing you know, they're being sold for 50 million a couple of years later. So Brighton, I totally trust their model. They always seem to replace the players when they do sell them. In 8th, we've got Manchester United. This is obviously a big jump from last season, and it's still a bit mental predicting them this low. But I think this would be a fairly good return for them. I think their goal this season probably would, at a minimum, would be getting to Europe again. They've got to get into Europe for so many reasons. But I think not being in Europe this season is probably one of the best things that could happen to them. I think having no European football could be crucial. That could make them just actually be able to reset and just focus on the Premier League, focus on maybe winning a cup. I think it is actually going to work in their favour. But it's a big season for Ruben Amorim. Of course, last season came in, was criticised, came into an absolute mess of a club ultimately, but I don't think he helped himself at times with his system. He doesn't really change his back three formation the way United play. He's very set in stone now, and I think that could be an issue. Saying that United don't have much money, they've still managed to spend an awful lot on Cunha, Sesko and Mbomo. I think they're all really good signings. They want Belieber, of course. They need more. I think they need some defenders as well, quite frankly. United, I still think they're going to have some really tough days and banter periods this season, but I think they can do better without European football, but it's a huge season. In 7th, I've got Newcastle United. This season really shouldn't have been anything to whinge about or be unhappy about. It should have been one to be celebrated. But they've had genuinely quite a disastrous pre-season. They've had basically every player they've gone for, minus Anthony Elanga, reject them. It's quite incredible. They've only won one game in pre-season, I believe, and they've also potentially now got to replace Alexander Isak. I mean, it's been disastrous for Newcastle. They've still got a very good team. I think they could still definitely challenge for Champions League. But you saw the last time they were in the Champions League, they found it very tough. And it was only when they got out of Europe that they picked up, but by which time it was a bit too late for them to even get back in. In 6th, maybe a bit bold really, but probably where they should be finishing anyway, I've gone for Tottenham. This is a huge jump up for them, but a jump up back to where you'd expect Tottenham to be. Under Thomas Frank, I think that could honestly be a bit like Graham Potter at Chelsea. It could go really well, or really bad. In terms of the transfer window, the signed Kudos and obviously Polinia. I think that's genuinely an incredibly good signing. I'm surprised they've managed to attract him. I think that's a really good deal. They've obviously lost Heung-min Son. That's not a massive loss really. He's not been the same player the last few years, but a club legend leaving. Lost James Maddison to a long-term injury, so you know they're going to need to replace him. I think Spurs will be solid. Being back in the Champions League is good for them. I don't see them doing a great deal in the Champions League. I'm a little bit nervous about this prediction. It might not happen, but I think Spurs surely are going to finish considerably higher than 17th. In 5th, I've got Aston Villa. Besides losing the loans of Rashford and Asensio, it's pretty much the same team. They've only signed one player, a striker from Nice, who had a very good season last time out. So I think that is something they absolutely needed to do, of course, having lost John Duran, then lost Rashford, they needed a striker. So they've done that, but they need more, in my opinion, Villa. I may be having them 5th, but I think a bit like with Newcastle, a bit like with any team that have got European football, you're going to need that squad depth, you know. And you saw when they signed those players last January, they were really able to compete on both fronts. And I think they just need to be able to replace those players again. I think it might be a PSR related issue with Villa. They don't really know if they can spend all that much. That's not all that helpful for them. But I think Europa League, unlike Champions League, they've got a good chance of winning that and going far. And I think if they do, they don't really need to worry too much where they finish in the league. They'll be in the Champions League anyway. So the top 4, we all know what 4 teams are coming, but in which order. I've got Chelsea in 4th place. Obviously, off the back of winning the Club World Cup, whether that means all that much, I don't know. But beating a extremely strong PSG side 4-0 is not to be sniffed at. Winning the conference last year, they're definitely coming into this season on one hell of a high. But Chelsea need to be more consistent. Last season, they were an outsider for the title the first half of the year, and then they really dropped off ultimately, didn't they? They've got to be more prolific, they've got to be more consistent, and obviously they've lost Levi Colwill for basically the whole season. They've still got about 9 centre-backs, so I wouldn't be too concerned, but they probably, in reality, do need to sign a really strong centre-back to replace him. They've brought in, obviously, Ginters from Dortmund, Delap from Ipswich, Pedro from Brighton, as well as many others. I'll be here a long time listing them all out. Some great signings for Chelsea. Pedro's already made his mark. I think Chelsea, if they could be a bit more consistent, absolutely in a title race, and I wouldn't put it past them. But in 3rd, I've got Manchester City. I did very nearly put them in 2nd, but this honestly could be in any order, this top 4. I think City will be stronger this season. I think they'll be more continuously in that top 3, and I think they'll be in a title race potentially. I'll be surprised if they're not in some form of title race. I can't see them being discarded from it like they were for most of last season. Ultimately, they've made some good signings. Reinders has come in from AC Milan, Nori from Wolves, Cherki from Lyon, and Trafford from Burnley coming back to the club. They've refreshed things there. They may very well do a bit more business, but most of that was done early in the summer before the Club World Cup. And a bit like with Chelsea, and I forgot to mention it with them, the Club World Cup might have an impact on City and Chelsea, having not had any as long as a gap anyway, as much of a rest. Maybe I'm playing it safe. They could win the league, you know, it's that difficult, this, and I think it's going to be that competitive. 2nd, I'm doing it again. I nearly demoted them a little bit, but in the end, I felt, no, I am going to stick with 2nd for Arsenal. That's going to be frustrating for them, but it's probably better than them dropping off. I think it genuinely all comes down to Victor Gyökeres. I think that really is that big of a signing. They've been needing a new striker for years and years. I've probably said it every video I've done about Premier League predictions, everyone said it. If Gyökeres works and he scores a lot of goals, that could be the difference. Because last season they drew 14 times. A few more goals than Gyökeres, they win like maybe half of them. Zubamendi, Norgard, Madueke from Chelsea as well, another player that's drawn from Chelsea. I think Arsenal will probably be about the same, but it's all about whether they can get over the line this season in the league, or at the very least, can they get their hands on another trophy. I think if they go another season without a trophy, I mean, they really are kind of becoming a bit like Tottenham in terms of banter level of not winning anything, because okay, it's not as long, but they're always up there and they don't quite get over the line. I think Arsenal have to win a trophy this season. And first, unsurprisingly, I've gone with Liverpool. They've got, obviously, already an unbelievably good side, But to do what they've done in the transfer window, on top of having already won the Premier League title with what they had before, that's pretty scary. When they've signed Kirkes and Frimpong at fullback, they brought in Wirtz, they brought in Ekatike, they want Alexander Isak. If they get Isak, dear God, the league might be over. They won it by such a big margin last year without being absolutely just outrageous every single week. They actually had a few games where they weren't anything too special, yet they won the title so convincingly. Yet they've now made the squad, on paper, even better. What are they going to do this season? Genuinely, it really comes down to whether City slip up again, whether Arsenal, draw too many games again, whether Chelsea are too inconsistent. I think it generally comes down to how much the other sides improve, let alone Liverpool even staying the same. So a tough one. I think it's going to be a fascinating season, but another season where, again, I'm probably going to look really stupid in 9 months' time. Relegation, it could be a very different outcome. I've played it quite safe. I've played the whole league quite safe, really. But relegation, I do think one of the three possibly stay up. I'm not completely convinced on my West Ham, my Wolves, my Brentford pick. I think Spurs and United is arguably a bit risky to put them up that high again. I'm really not completely convinced on some of these picks, but that's the whole fun of it. Please get your predictions in the comments. Please be respectful to mine as well if you're going to comment on that. And please like and subscribe to Rads if you're new around here. Thanks very much, everybody, and up the Reds.